There are those in the MECFS and chronic illness spheres who keep talking about quote unquote the environment as if it were an external force that simply happens to us mold, buildings, toxins, exposure. But this already misses the point. Environment is not a cause in itself, it is a result. What makes us sick is not nature acting alone, but an historically specific social system that organizes how we build, how we house, how we regulate, and how we abandon. As Engels wrote in The Condition of the Working Class in England, the bourgeoisie cares nothing for the health and lives of the workers, unless forced to do so by society. That wasn't a moral complaint, it was a structural diagnosis. Illness is not an accident nor even out of apparent malice. Rather, it is produced wherever the production and reproduction of human life is subordinated to profit. When mold is treated as the root cause of MECFS or other conditions, rather than a symptom of how environments are produced under capitalism or the capitalist mode of production, the analysis collapses into reformism, i.e., if only the right doctors or researchers were in charge, if only the right agency listened to us, if only the correct classifications were adopted, if only such and such amount of money or advocacy were raised. But Engels was also explicit about the limits of this thinking. In The Origin of the Family, Private Property and the State, he wrote, the state is a product of society at a certain stage of development. It is the admission that this society has become entangled in an insoluble contradiction with itself. The state is not a neutral instrument waiting to be corrected. It exists to manage those contradictions, not to abolish them. Appealing to it as a solution to illness produced by for profit production is not realism, it's illusion. The state, for example, is one of the largest culprits of pollution in the entire world, especially the US government and especially the military. They own most of the buildings, fleet of cars, use the most energy, and employ the most people. This is why quote unquote environment becomes an empty abstraction. Just like the quote unquote economy in vulgar political economics, it appears as a natural force rather than an historical one. Responsibility vanishes, causes are displaced. In instances where people do have to undertake remediation, people are told to flee from their caretakers, to relocate to a desert, an uninfected dwelling, another country, to adapt. Illness becomes a personal failure to escape rather than a social pathology. The cost is borne out by the patients and the sick, not capital. We look for agency which has no effect on this variable. Lastly, Engels warned what happens when society dominates nature itself without controlling the social relations that shape that domination. In Dialectics of Nature, he wrote, let us not, however, flatter ourselves overmuch on account of our human victories over nature. For each such victory, nature takes its revenge on us. The revenge is not mystical, it is dialectical. When production is organized for profit rather than life, the consequences return through poisoned air, water, housing, and thus bodies and minds which reflect this. If you actually care about the quote unquote environment, you don't start with mold and you don't start with other toxins and you don't start with other chemicals, etc., and so forth. You start with how this environment came into existence, what controls and facilitates its production, and why human health is systematically sacrificed to accumulation in its absolute form. Until that system is uprooted entirely, we will keep naming symptoms and calling it explanation.